Wasabi guys, Void here coming back at y'all with another new series. This one is hopefully going to take the place of my last series that I did, Favorite Commander Cards. I just didn't really see that series going anywhere, so going to be replacing it with this, and hopefully it takes and you guys enjoy it even more so than that series. This is going to be called Commander Secrets. Now, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're going to be looking at cards that are multi-dimensional, that are very well designed, and have a lot to offer us right now and definitely in the future. Now, for this episode, we're going to be looking at one of my favorite cards recently, and that is Fractured Identity from Commander 2017. 5 mana in Azorius colors, so blue-white, for a sorcery that can exile a target non-land permanent, and each player other than its controller creates a token that's a copy of it. So I believe the day that this card was spoiled, people automatically knew about the Phage, the Untouchable combo, where basically all you have to do is have a Phage, the Untouchable on your board, you cast Fractured Identity, you exile your Phage, each of your opponents, doesn't matter how many of them, they all get a Phage, the Untouchable that enters the battlefield under their control. However, that Phage the Untouchable wasn't cast, and it definitely wasn't cast from their hand, so they all lose the game, which is a very disgusting little combo there. Definitely an alternate win con if you want to throw it into a deck for that purpose. But there are definitely more combos to explore. I'm not going to name off every single one of them. There are going to be some silly interactions that aren't necessarily going to be win cons, but they're definitely noteworthy. We have other ones such as Demonic Pact, which is a bit worse. It puts your opponents on a 4-turn clock, so if they're unable to get rid of their Demonic Pact, or if they're unable to kill you before it kills them all, they all lose. So it's great at putting that pressure on them. It does, however, turn the game into basically archenemy, so not nearly as good as the Phage Untouchable combo that is going to lose them the game right there. So it's still a fun interaction though. I still like Demonic Pact. I think it's one of the more unique cards in the game. But we also have Leveler. This enters the battlefield, you exile your library, which is very devastating for you, but on that same turn, hopefully you have enough mana, you cast this, and then you use Fractured Identity. Each of your opponents have to exile their library. The cool thing about this, though, is that it's not their turn yet, so they get an upkeep to do something. Maybe they can respond, put something on the top of their deck, maybe, so that they can survive, but for the most part, it's going to kill them. They're going to draw, they have no cards in their library, and they lose the game. In turn order, that is pretty cool. There's also a combo with Transcendence, which you do kind of have to have less than 20 life in order for this to work. You have to have it out there already, and then you cast a Fractured Identity on it, so most of the time people are going to have a decent sized life total. They start out with 40 after all. The only trouble with this combo is getting yourself below 20 in order for this to work, so it's one of those risky cards that I don't really see this combo being that viable, and it's not guaranteed to kill off everybody. Just most of the time it is, because hopefully your opponents are at 20 or more life, but it's still definitely a noteworthy combo nevertheless. And there's also a combo, this isn't a win con, but it is a pretty disgusting interaction, and that is Radiate. You basically get to choose an instant or sorcery, so Fractured Identity does qualify because it is exiling a target non-land permanent. It only has one target, so each other permanent that it could target, it gets a copy for. So basically, for every single non-land permanent that's on the board, that player's opponents each get a copy of it. So a very funny card. It's going to make the board state very chaotic, and Radiate is already a pretty chaotic card, so throwing that little interaction there is definitely noteworthy. And there are definitely more interactions than just that. There's some pretty cool ones, especially for Group Hug. You could use this on a Howling Mine. Even if it is your own Howling Mine, it's one of those cards where it doesn't matter who controls it. Every single player is still getting the same effect. So use this on your Howling Mine. Each of your opponents gets one, and then you could draw something like 3 extra cards. That's a pretty cool interaction there. There's also the funny, hateful interaction against Grand Arbiter Augustine. If you want to exile their Grand Arbiter Augustine, each of their opponents is going to get one, so the player who was kind of being a jerk with all these tax effects is going to have their spells cost 3 more, which I think is justice. Now, as far as fits for commander decks, it's pretty much just, do you like the card enough to put it in there? I wouldn't have it replace good, solid, precise removal, such as Anguished Unmaking, Return to Dust. Those cards are going to be necessary, especially if you depend on your removal. I would not treat this card like removal. it could be that, but only for very specific situations where there's a combo piece or something like that where having every other player control that combo piece isn't going to be a threat. Then I might consider it to be removal, but it is 5 mana for sorcery speed, exiling a non-land permanent. You can get that for much cheaper and at better speed, instant speed. So you definitely want to consider this card for the interactions as opposed to just the precision. And the decks that I obviously think are pretty good are going to be Kineos and Tyro of Meletis and Zedru the Great-Hearted. I think these are two decks where this is probably going to see the most play in. Kineos and Tyro because it is group hug, and sometimes giving your opponents copies of Howling Mine, stuff like that, is never really a bad thing, and it's going to make you less of a target, so it's multi-purposed. I think that's pretty cool. And obviously Zedru has an obsession with giving your opponents undesirable permanents. But you also have the obvious one, Taigam Ojutai Master, also in the same commander deck. This was actually in the Dragon commander deck, so while it doesn't necessarily fit the best with dragons, in my opinion, it's also pretty cool with Taigam because your instants and sorceries can't be countered, and it gains rebound, so you could fool around with it. I think rebound's pretty cool, but maybe not the best fit for it. Send Triplets, however, I think is probably the best deck if you want to go that combo route with Phage the Untouchable, because that deck is all about choosing a player, stealing their stuff, and Fractured Identity is another way that you can mess around with your opponent's stuff, and I think that is a pretty disgusting interaction with Phage the Untouchable in Esper colors. If I had to pick a commander for those combos, Send Triplets is definitely up there. And you of course have Grand Arbiter Augustine, because if you don't want to use Fractured Identity on Grand Arbiter, you could just throw it into a Grand Arbiter deck and punish your opponents that way. So that is pretty cool. Make the taxes a little bit higher. And you of course have Feldegriff because, group hug. Feldegriff is probably the weakest group hug deck, and it's pretty much the most obvious. I'm just here to have fun deck. Doesn't really care that much about winning. So Fractured Identity is already going to be perfect in that deck. But overall, the card is just a perfect example as to why we love the Commander products, because we see cards like these that are just so well designed, not just for the present, not just for past cards, but for the future of Magic the Gathering. When we get new cards, it's always going to be fun to see how this is going to interact. If I give my opponents a copy of this card, is it going to be deadly? I love thinking long term with cards, and I think it's always important that you have a card that is so multi-dimensional that I could see play in the future for years to come. Now, is this card going to be perfect? No. It's very situational. You have to depend on your opponents having good cards or very specific cards that are going to interact with it better. And you also have to build your deck around it too, because it's not going to be as dependable as removal. If you are treating it like removal, again, be careful. Use it only on cards that are going to be good for the specific deck that their owner has it in there for a reason. Maybe a Deadeye Navigator, you might want to get rid of it. You don't really think your other opponents are going to take advantage of it quite in the same way that your current opponent who wants to combo off with it is going to. So very situational, but I think when it comes to enjoying the game of Commander, making things a little bit more political, which is, again, one of the biggest aspects of the game, politics, making enemies, making allies, Fractured Identity is a perfect card for doing that. And Commander 2017 is filled with cards like these, well designed, brand new, not just filled with a bunch of reprints from the past, but rather cards that are going to interact well in the future. As far as prices go, this is a Commander set card, so keep that in mind. We have seen cards go up in price just because they were only printed in one set, but it is still around $1, $1.15 on TCG Player, and it is the only version of the card. There isn't a foil version, promo version, anything like that, so you never know the possibilities down the road. But as is, if you don't want to get the deck, it is pretty much a dirt cheap bulk rare to a lot of people, so it shouldn't be hard to obtain. But overall, I think when it comes to appreciating the politics of the Commander game, cards like these kind of get underrated every now and then. There are going to be some people who are just hung up on the fact that you have to give your other opponents copies of a non-land permanent. Some people just don't like helping out others, and a card like this might be a little bit of a deterrent for them, and that's fine. I mean, if you like your more precise cards, if you like knowing exactly what's going to happen with your cards, that's fine. I usually like that myself. When I want to make a hardcore control deck, I'm not going to look at a card like this. It might be a consideration, but I usually want to go with the most precise cards. But if I'm looking to have fun, if I'm looking to make a deck that just does janky, fun things, this is the perfect card. If you don't necessarily care about beating down and oppressing all of your opponents at the same time, and this is definitely another good card for you. But anyway, Hope you guys enjoy this series. I will definitely try to continue it. I don't know if it's going to be a once a week thing, but I will definitely look for more cards, make more videos about them, show off different interactions, combos even, and I'll look for your guys' responses. So you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.